Good afternoon. Tony Dattino. I am the founder and chairman of the USA Memory Championship. And we're moving along with the planning and the registration and the games that we'll have for our 25th event. And my golly, as I've said in the past, to think that it's been 25 years that we've been doing a USA Memory Championship, it's hard to believe. But it is, and here we are. At the end of July, we'll have people competing on virtual for the best 12, and we'll take the top 12, and we'll invite them to Winter Park, Florida, where they will compete on September 28th, who does have the best memory in the United States. In the meantime, I do a lot of reading, and I found one of my former executive clients, and a dear friend now, gave me a book, Why We Remember. And I found a section in here. I want to see if it raises any concerns on you as you think about this and where it's got significant applications. But he was talking about a study that was done, talking about memories and how it goes against Ebbinghaus, which was a memory researcher that gave us some of the principles we live by today. And was basically saying, hey, I'm not sure. I'm going to observe and describe how we use memories in our everyday lives, but I'm also going to go back and think about how we remember things that have happened in our past and what's going on in our brains as we go back into what I call our history books, and we now have to bring those history books forward into the present time. In an experiment, he introduced a group of volunteers chosen because of the culture and the context that was foreign to the students that he was working at. He could recall the gist of the story, but they made some characteristic errors. It was not simply a case of failing to remember some details, but rather adapt the details to match up with their own cultural expectations and norms. Let's go back over that because this is significant. He was asking people to go back in their history and study some of their folk tales, or things that they remembered when they were 20 years younger. His subjects could recall the gist of a story. So they had the main idea. So I can remember, we had a spaceman, a rocket that went off to the moon. I can remember when the Mets won their World Series in 1969. But can I remember the details of who the winning pitcher, or who was the batter that hit the runs that scored that helped them win the game? I can remember my child's first birthday, but do I remember where I was working and what I was doing, what my first reactions were as I came in and saw my first little baby? And he used to say they could get the big picture, but wait a minute, some of the characteristics of it are wrong. So now if I want to get through some of the details, now we call this trivia, right? We have trivia games that we play and trivia shows, history shows, and what you can remember. But in this case, the students, they made mistakes in recalling the details of specific events. Words such as a canoe and a paddle were replaced by a boat and an oar. Seal hunting became fishing. So the different elements of the details in the original event were modified for the context of how people were in their own lives, in their own minds, and in many cases their own emotional content at the present. We do not simply replay a past event. So now comes, we just don't replay it. It's not like we're a video recorder and we're now going to record, we've recorded it, and now we're just going to play it back in word-for-word replay. We put together a story on the fly based on our personal and cultural experiences. So when we retell the story, we're retelling it from our own personal experience, and we're retelling it from our own cultural backgrounds. So wait a minute. If I was a witness to something, and I needed to recall it for some purposes of, we need to know what happened back then, and I'm now putting my own twist on that based on my own background, experience, context, and my present emotional state. does that not distort what I bring back in detail, which he said earlier, in these experiments, we found that people don't recall prior experiences in detail, but in the big picture. The insight is key to understanding why the brain's machinery for imagination and memory are somewhat independent, but somewhat not. They are based both, so imagination and history, memories, are based on pulling up knowledge about what can happen, though not necessarily what did happen. So now he distinguishes when people are going back into these stories and they're bringing them forward, sometimes they don't recall what actually did happen, but more so maybe what should have happened. And you say, whoa, wait a minute. We've got a problem with that. I started thinking about this. I'm saying, my goodness, we have people that are called for criminal testimony. And if they're going back on this and say, well, gee, I don't like that person, and now let me tell you how I recall what I think I saw, and the colors and the details, and now big contents, I saw an accident, or I saw a crime, big picture. But now I'm being asked to recall it, and I go back and recall it in the context of how I feel about criminals and maybe how I feel about this person. So when I'm re-describing it, the context at the detail level may be altered. This is what he calls the fable of reconstruction. The reconstructive nature of memory, meaning I rebuild, I retell the story of the past, means that our recollections can some take on a life of their own. Speaking at a New York Rangers hockey game, an NBC news anchor recounted how he and his crew were in a helicopter in Iraq, and it was forced down by a rocket grenade. So he's retelling this story about when he was an anchor and when his crew and he were in Iraq, and he's now going to retell the story. His account was debunked by veterans who were there. So if you're going to tell us, now each of the veterans may have seen it a different way as well. So now you have a diversity of what people thought they saw. And that's why it's always interesting when you talk to three people that saw an accident or a crime or any kind of an event or a party that they may have gone to, how three different people will recall the details in a different light. He and his crew were in a helicopter in Iraq, so his account was debunked. He never encountered enemy fire during his visit, though he found himself at the center of a firestorm after what appeared to be a newspaper reporter telling a blatant lie. Which brings me in today's day and age, depending upon who and what and station you're listening to, is there not a bias of how news is being reported? And we see that all the time. So do you believe what you see from somebody reporting what they think they saw and the bias and the context that they want you to take away from it? And I read that in newspapers all the time based on the writer and the paper. What do they want you to take away from what they're writing? And it's on all sides. And so as people, when we're talking about something we've witnessed or something we're going to report on, some presentation we're going to do based on prior experiences, we need to realize that our present day emotions, our present day context that we give to things may all be tinted and shaded a bit by where we are in the present moment as we go back up in here and try to recall a past and describe it. And to me, a past is anything more than a day ago, because those are the history lessons that we bank back up in here in our cortex, that we file away through a night's rest. And now we retell, we re-describe what those are. The problem with this particular anchor, although the elements of his story overlap what really happened, the story he told years later did not belong to him, but to the soldiers in the helicopter that had gone down. And that was the end of this reporter's career. as people screamed out and yelled what a lie he was telling, or a prefabrication he was having. And I get to see that on TV on a regular basis if you follow anything in terms of our upcoming election in November of 2024. You get to the point where your head spins and you say, I don't know who, what, and where to believe. Certainly not newspapers, but where can I get to see some of these things with my own eyes and have confirmation from people I trust and have confidence in that I'm being given the correct and accurate story. That's my Live with Tony for today. So off you go. Have a good evening, and I want you to think about that. There are things that you've seen in your past that your present bias would change or modify a bit and adapt to your current emotions, your current context of what you might be doing, and re-describe a prior historical event that's in your memory in a way that really didn't match the details of how it happened. All right, we will see you on Friday. Have a good rest of your week. We're at the middle of it. And today's temperature here in Windermere, Florida, made it to 88 degrees. So I think what I'm going to do now is close down my laptop for the afternoon and go take a jump in the pool.